Failure is inevitable. It's in any goal process, anything we're doing, we're gonna fail. Like the best card players in the world don't win every match, don't achieve every goal that they've set. So I think it's important to understand and really find really healthy ways to process the perceived quote unquote failures, and maybe even reframe those into kind of feedback. What did I learn? What is the new goal? What is the new thing to be flexible about? Everyone, welcome back to Decked Out and Dialed In. Restart. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Decked Out and Dialed In. Today we're setting, Jesus. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Decked Out and Dialed In. Today we're really addressing a topic that's near and dear to my heart, not only as a clinical psychologist, but as an athlete, and that's goal setting and how powerful those things can be. And I'm not just talking about setting New Year's resolutions and these big kind of goals that are like, win a golden Mickey or these big goals, but how can we really utilize scientifically supported strategies to allow us to set really great goals to move us along towards those bigger goals?
That's right. Whether you're an athlete, a student, or a professional trying to stay consistent, the way that you set your goals can completely change your results. We'll break down what research tells us about how to set goals that work and how to avoid the common mistakes that derail progress. Let's start by looking at what the science actually says about how we form and pursue goals.
Definitely. Well, I think the three big categories that I always talk about when we're setting effective goals is they have to be specific, right? They have to be measurable, and they have to have some kind of meaning and purpose to us, right? And those three categories allow us to really set effective goals. And that's what the research actually shows as well. Because if it's not specific, if it's very vague, it's hard to find that to be measurable. And if it's not measurable, what are we working towards, right? If I'm setting a goal of like just becoming better, what does becoming better look like, right? What is that? It's not very specific, and it's really hard to be measurable. But if I say, hey, I'm going to really work on my ability to be on the draw and become a better player on the draw, because that's where I struggle. Right there is not only a specific goal, but it's also measurable, right? We can also tweak better to like be more successful or have a higher win percentage, and that it even be a better specific measurable goal. And the last piece is like being that idea that it has to be something that means something to us. Because if it doesn't mean something to us, we're just setting a goal to set a goal, and there's nothing behind the scenes kind of pushing us to want to achieve that goal, right? Because without a desire to actually achieve the goal we're working on, we're just setting goals. Um, you know, what has been your personal experience when it comes to goal setting and trying to kind of achieve those kind of latter higher goals?
So I can, for one, say that I'm super guilty of making those large macro-based goals that can seem like mountains to people, right? And the moment that you face your first failure, you're just like, that's it, done, hands up. And it can be a really vicious cycle. So more recently, I've been looking into the micro level goals, that even things that you were suggesting, right? So one of the biggest improvements I've made as a card player has been to learn how to play better on the draw, right? Because uh, historically speaking, the decks that I've played tend to overperform well on the play, and as long as I have that locked down, and again, you can't really control the variance of a coin flip, die roll, or whatever means that you're determining who goes first. But I think what really matters most is like how you can plan to turn the game around on a game that you have on the draw. And I've noticed a lot of improvement with that. One, games go a lot quicker because usually the opponents I want to play they want to play on the play,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to practice on the draw. So usually at practice or even local sometimes too, I'll opt to go on the draw, and it works out better.
Oh, 100%.
Uh,
I like that. I like that strategy. I like how you incorporate not only the plan of like what that looks like, but like the areas in which you're playing. Like you said, locals and even practice with team or practice with friends. I think that's amazing.
yeah, for sure. And it's oddly enough, you're going to notice more progress the more micro goals you accomplish, because those become the foundational pieces for the macro goals, right? So they'll fall into line. Like, obviously, if I'm practicing every day, I will ultimately become the better player that I want to be from that macro goal. And then the results may begin to show at more of the higher competitive levels, and you realize that it really is those little pieces that really help paint the bigger picture.
Yeah. And what you're talking about is even backed up by science and in psychology. There's a goal setting strategy, or it's a strategy called the half method. And the research behind that actually looked at individuals that were wanting to start a kind of a fitness journey on themselves. And they got a whole group of people that were going to start a fitness journey, split them up into two groups, and they asked the groups together how often they think they could work out. And as a collective, they said 4 days. So they split them in half, put one group at 4, one group at 2, and then they sent like self-report measures like about their satisfaction, about kind of how they're feeling, if they're still engaging in physical fitness. And the group that actually started with the 2 days a week and not the 4 days a week reported higher levels of satisfaction and reported higher levels of still engaging in that behavior or that activity. Why? It's directly tied to what you said. It's when I set the smaller goals, it allows me to build a momentum. Oh, I accomplished this goal. And even if they're really simple, easy goals, right? It could be I just want to play more on the draw to get more comfortable being in the behind, because again, in Lorcana and other TCGs, that position's tough to be in, and it feels uncomfortable not having that first card on the board, right? And I think that can be really challenging. So it's backed up by science and research that when we set those small goals, those kind of more micro goals, and we build the momentum, we feel more confident in ourselves, we feel more power, more control of kind of that goal. And I tell people, if it's hard to set those micro goals, then set the macro goal, but then ask yourself the sub question of, okay, what are the steps on that? If I'm at the top of that ladder, what are the steps to come down that ladder to where I'm at right now? And then vice versa. If I'm on the bottom and I'm like, I don't even know the bigger goal right now. Okay, like, well, what are some steps I can take to kind of progress myself upwards or higher on that ladder, where in a direction I want to be? Because the last piece I didn't talk about, but goals have to be flexible, right? They have to be flexible. We can't be overly rigid in our goals, because if we're overly rigid in the goals, we're going to fail, right? Because if it's the idea of like, I'm going to practice, specific is great, but overly specific, I'm going to get in, 57 games on the draw this week. What? That's a lot, and maybe they shouldn't be as rigid as that. So they need to be specific, measurable, but they can't be overly rigid. They have to be flexible.
Yeah, and even like I can really be guilty of I want to do like 50 games a week, right? But then you just do the math and realize, theoretically, I'm available to play online with the team for maybe 5 nights a week, right? So then you do that, you look back, okay, that means I need to play between what 10 to 13 games a day, and then you realize that's not as feasible. Myself in particular being a family man and job and life, like obviously balance is a key component here, but just kind of dialing back and realizing, okay, maybe I can commit to 2 to 3 games a day, right? Because I mean, if you look at it, like you go to locals, and you play your 2 or 3 games, or sorry, your 3 or more games, um, and you're at the shop until 9, 10 o'clock, and it does take time. So, um, again, just using those as reference points, and it feels a lot better to say you're going to accomplish 3 games and doing it versus saying you're going to do 10 and completing 3 games.
Exactly, because it hits the parts of our brain that is a reinforcer, right? It hits the part of your brain of accomplishing a goal. I felt good. I get that kind of little ding of dopamine, versus setting these large goals and putting this pressure and failing, and then we feel like we're failing. And that's talking about that half method. That's kind of what the researchers found, is that like when people set those high 4 days right off the get go of that working out or the physical activity, some life happens, right? Rain, had a bad day at work, don't feel good, and then if you have an early failure in your goal setting and your goal achievement, you tend to become discouraged. Or if you have repeated failures, right? Maybe we got to a level and we're progressing, but I feel like I'm plateauing at that level. Maybe it's because I need to set another micro goal inside of there, because I'm continuing to fail that next ring. So what's the next kind of first step on the ladder. So what's in between there? What's like a half step where I can work? Again, with the mindset of being flexible inside of that, because again, we need our brain needs that thing. As much as we want to feel like as human beings we should just will ourselves into doing things, it's not necessarily how our brain functions. Our brain can do that in a very short kind of triage based set. So that means like we can do that in a very short pressured time, but like we need time to actually have that dopamine hit. We need time to actually for our brain to do the thing that it needs to do to be able to grow and change. And we only can kind of force it to do the thing for only really a short period of time before it says, hey, I don't like this.
Nice. I think that's a good spot to stop for that segment because the segue into the motivation part is going to be super killer.
Yeah, let me pull that up.
All right. You threw a bunch of big words at me, man.
Sorry.
Intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation.
So intrinsic is internal, extrinsic is external. So intrinsic goal would be like, I want to be able to walk from here to all around Disney without having to sit down. Extrinsic goal is I want to have a six pack ab. One is the extrinsic world. Extrinsic goals are I want to get old Mickey. This extrinsic thing I'm seeking versus the intrinsic thing is I want to be the best player I can be.
Got it. Okay, cool.
So the intrinsic goals are actually healthier for us and we feel more satisfied than the extrinsic goals because the extrinsic goals have variables or things that can impact us that are outside of our control, and when that happens we feel powerless and helpless. So like again it's like I want I'll use a sillier example. I want women to find me attractive as an extrinsic goal because I can't force
Change their
people
perception and stuff like
yeah,
that.
yeah. Like, but if I want to get healthier for me and change my body composition because it makes me feel more happier or healthier, or even just like my mobility is better or quality of life is better, awesome. That's a great intrinsic goal.
And your attractiveness becomes the side effect of that
There you
instead
go.
of being like
Yeah.
the goal. Okay, got it.
So function over like aesthetic per se. Like you want to do the function goal, not the aesthetic goal, because the aesthetic goal is subjective.
Got it. All right, cool. All right, so I'm gonna go into the next segment now. All right, so let me just make sure. Okay. All right, so we talked about the effect that the goal planning has on us, trying to accomplish those quick hits of dopamine when appropriate and stuff like that. However, some of us actually need to get that kickstart, right? So we need like that motivation piece of it. So there are a couple things that we can talk about here. Mainly, we can look at the differences between intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation and how it affects the goal persistence, right? So you can think of being like like you're saying, I want to be the best Lorcana player in the world, right? There's a lot of variables involved in that statement. So that's something that's probably more extrinsic than intrinsic. But you can do something like I want to learn how to play Blurple better, right? So you break that down and you're like, okay, so I understand that my turn 4 in every game is, or sorry, my ink to 4 in every game is super impactful, and I need to learn how to properly plan for that whether it comes to the mulligan or even at the deck build and stuff like that, the matchup in particular. What 4-drop are you trying to target on turn 3 that gives you the best advantage, right? And again, going based off of what we discussed before, the more and more you practice what you need versus a particular matchup, naturally you end up becoming a better Blurple player, which will also help you become a better Lorcana player. So that just kind of plays into that. So it's really important to focus on the goals that you have as much control as possible with versus those that kind of come as a side effect of accomplishing those goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's the recognition, the prizing, the trophy, the claim to fame, like those all come based off of those foundational motivations that you come up with as you're making your goals.
100%. And I think I love what you said there about like the perspective of the goal itself, because if I want to be the best Lorcana player in the world, right? There's so many variables out of my control, right? The other players, variance, the tournament structure. I could come with the best deck in the room, but it get played in, paired into the worst matchups in the room, and then maybe only three of them, but I might pair into all three of them. So a lot of extrinsic goals have a lot of variables outside of our personal control. So that's why they tend to be less satisfactory of a goal setting strategy for us because there's so many things outside of our control. So when those things happen, we can feel powerless, we feel discouraged. Where if things are more inside of those intrinsic goals are solely 100% inside of our control, right? I want to be the best blurple player I can be, or learn these play lines better, or learn mulligan strategy better. Like those are internal goals that I have all the control, and no one else has any impact on my ability to do that. So and obviously use the things we used before about, the goal setting strategy about being, measurable, flexible, and measurable, flexible, and specific. But like, that is the core of a lot of that piece. Is we need to be able to look at, like, is this in my 100% in my control or not? Because if it's not, that's okay. We can set those big extrinsic goals. Like, there's no problem with that. But understanding that the other goals, the sub goals that we kind of talked about in the last section, are very much intrinsic goals because they're, again, we feel more satisfied with them. We feel like we have more control of those, and they're actually easier to accomplish. So I love how you said that, that kind of really looking at how that affects us and our motivation. Because again, a lot of times people get discouraged with motivation is not because they're just unmotivated people, is because they're setting these big extrinsic goals, and it's not 100% in their control to achieve those things. How many people went into the last DLC undefeated, and then like just things happened outside of their control, right?
Yeah. I do want to touch on one thing though too that I think that comes with the lofty goal setting that if you continue to create these goals and miss them, I think you get into this really bad feedback loop of like fear of failure, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
just absolutely demolishes your motivation. So, like, that's why it's really important to not only try to aim for as many realistic intrinsic goals as possible, but make sure they are those small, durable goals that, okay, great. Like, let's say that you're trying to hit 10,000 steps a day, right? Maybe the first goal is I want to do a lap around the park
Oh
that's
yeah,
in my
great.
neighborhood, right? It's not 10,000 steps, but it's something. And you can do that and you realize, wow, this is not too bad. And then, if you're like me, I'm a super like nerd when it comes to tracking the fitness stuff. So like I track the steps
Mm-hmm.
in each lap, and you're like, oh, that just means I need to do 4 laps a day. That's actually not that bad. And then you end up doing it, and then you feel better, and then next thing you might be looking at 5Ks next. But you also, if you're happy just doing your 10,000 steps, that's totally okay too.
Yep, exactly. And I'm going to add a tiny bit is you need to reward yourself for the steps below it. They can't just be like, all right, accomplish that, on to the next. You have to reward yourself. If you're putting effort in on playing on the draw, or you're putting effort in on mulligan strategy, or putting effort in on these intrinsic goal sets, and you start to find yourself doing it correctly, you go to your locals, you go to your league night, and you're like, wow, I mulligan appropriately. I played on when I played on the draw, I felt more in control, unless I felt less anxious, or I felt like, whatever the goal was for you, reward that. I'm not telling people to go out and buy packs, but like maybe it's buying a pack, or maybe it is like, that thing, because we need to reward the behavior, right? If we're gonna quote unquote feel bad or punish the negative, the I wouldn't say negative, but the perceived failure of a goal, we have to also reinforce the positive steps that we're taking, and don't just glaze over those like they don't matter, because they matter. They do matter. And again, it's about building that momentum. So if I'm not reinforcing the momentum because I should just be doing that anyways, that's not healthy for us either, brain wise and motivation wise.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, so it's like even those 10,000 step piece, like it's a great goal to have, but you got to reinforce it. Like, oh, I did that, so how am I going to kind of reinforce that for myself, and kind of like, give myself a good old pat in the head because I did that thing. Because guess what? One lap around the park is 100% more laps around the park that you did than you did last week. right? So that's pretty impressive.
That's a really good way to look at it. Cool. So you are starting segment 3. So evidence based tools for tracking progress. So for on my side, bring up the feedback loop concept. Regular review helps refine goals, not abandon them. Share practical templates, smart check-ins, progress bar, mood goal link. Tie in mindfulness. Notice emotional reactions to progress can guide healthier adjustments. Okay, cool. I'll probably just riff off of anything that you add on, but I have a general idea of what to talk about.
And I think that's a great transition to even talk about the failure piece, because failure is inevitable. It's in any goal process, anything we're doing, we're gonna fail. Like, the best card players in the world don't win every match, right? And don't achieve every goal that they have set. So I think it's important to understand and really find really healthy ways to process, the perceived quote unquote failures, and maybe even reframe those into kind of feedback. Okay, what is the feedback? What did I learn? What is the new goal? What is the new thing to be flexible about? What's your kind of thoughts on kind of perceived failure or not achieving our goals, and maybe how we can respond to those?
Well, I think most importantly, and I see this with a lot of card players, I think you just need to be kind to yourself. Like it's okay to train like an all-star athlete, and you do see their rigorous regimens, their reactions towards losing games, and it's tough because you can also find yourself extremely relatable to that. Like obviously you want to win, right? like
Yeah,
like
yeah.
there's nothing wrong with wanting to win. I think it's how you treat yourself when you don't win, or you don't accomplish that goal. And I think you just, for example, you come home. I know I've done a lot better with this. I used to be really salty card player, really bad. Taking the losses really bad, ignoring advice from my opponents who are, again, they just want to play against the best people, right? So if for them to help me become better, helps them become better. But I was like, no, I know what I'm doing. And it just, it sucks. But reflecting a lot on that, realizing like, again, we in the last episode, we talked about my really strong start at DLC Milwaukee, and it sucked not making day two after that. But I had a really good support group, and then even myself internally, mentally, I was like, tomorrow's a new day. Let's do that. And that I'm sure I'm not the only person that it happened to, and I'm sure that everybody reacts differently to it. But I think overall, um, just be nice to yourself. You're human, right? Everyone's human. Um, Mistakes can be made, whether they were intentional or not. And you just gotta bring your best self forward, moving on.
I love that, and I think, give yourself the grace to have some emotion. We all have sweat equity into this. We all practice. We all pay for these cards, pay for trips, put time and effort in. So you're gonna have an emotional response. Let yourself have that emotional response. The intensity and duration is what we need to pay attention to, right? Give yourself that 5-10 minutes of, I'm just gonna go and let myself be in my feels for a minute, right? And then how am I gonna recover from that? That's part of that failure, or re-goal setting strategy, is like, I gotta let myself feel for a minute, and that's okay. It's just, again, feeling is not behaviors. Behaviors is like yelling, screaming at people, or like flipping the table over. Those are behaviors, not feelings. So if you're upset, let yourself be upset. Get up, go out. Get away, or to your support system, or whatever that you personally need. Let yourself be there for a minute. Understand that it's because you care, right? It's not because you don't care. But then kind of make sure you're managing the intensity, managing the duration of that. And then once we kind of got through that process, sitting down with our goal as, that loss, or that thing that happened, as feedback. Okay, where can I improve from this? What am I going to do my next match, my next game? Because I don't know about you, but I've had the experience where I didn't do that process. I just got my feels. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna do this next match. I'm gonna win, and then I made the exact same mistake. I walked into the exact same play line. I walked into the exact same interaction, and I was like, I did it again because I didn't take that time to reset for myself and look at it as feedback. I just got upset and wanted to rush into it again.
Yeah, yeah. You're just trying to look for like a quick win to dismiss what you're supposed to be feeling. Your body's telling you, hey, like you kind of want to be sad about this, or you kind of want to be mad, or and then your brain and body process what it needs to process, and then once you get a better handle on it, you just again reset yourself for the next match, and hopefully do better, and then realize that again, like there are things that happen in this game that are just out of your control, and you could be absolutely playing your best and your opponent can be just top decking every single answer they need against you. It happens, and you have to realize that there's nothing you could have done on your side to change that outcome. And the sooner you realize that, the less painful it will be when your brain is trying to convince you that you had 100% control in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, I had an opponent that had no cards in their hand, and they had a decent board state in front of me, and they went finders into find not find second star into second star. They sung it twice in one turn, so I was like, oh, this is fun for me. You now have all the cards, and like that happens, right? And those things gonna happen. So it's regrouping and saying, okay, sometimes it's the idea of like where is the learnable moments, and sometimes it's just like if there's no in that regrouping stage, if there isn't thing where like I misplayed or that it was just the variance, it's like now we engage in self-soothing, because I think that can ties into previous conversations we've had, is that if there isn't this like goal we can work towards because there was nothing done that was a blunder or a mistake or a misplay, sometimes just the cards aren't in your favor. You needed X card, you didn't see X card. I don't know, about you, but I've dug 15 deep for a Clarabelle and still never found a Clarabelle, and like was like, all right, well that's just in the cards. Like I don't have any, so that happens, right? So I think just also being grounded in that place of like sometimes it's not because we made a blunder. There's failures along the way. It's part of the process of competition, right? And if there isn't a place where we can ground ourselves in setting that next goal, then we need to ground ourselves in self-soothing, right? Those are the grounding skills, and the other things that we've talked about in previous episodes is like so important to that, because it's a part of this process of failure. It's like I don't want to be a nerd, but like Data said to Captain Picard, Captain Picard said to Data, you can play the game exactly, you can make every right move and still lose. And that happens in competition every day.
Yep, 100% agree.
And I think, even, from the experiences you had, like you talked to us in the last episode about just going to your support system. Yeah, we broke some packs, cool, but like we went to our support system and we got that, and then you kind of try to pivot and make the next day the best you could, and like that's it's a great recovery, right? You're allowed to feel your feels.
Definitely. Cool. I just want to confirm, were you working on segment 3 or segment 2?
That was three.
we we skipped 2. Did we? Because I started reading some stuff from segment 2 while you started on segment 3. Wait, no, you're right. Sorry, that's me.
Oh, we skipped three. We went from two to four.
Did we go to 4? Oh, that's what
Yeah,
it was.
because we talked about the intrinsic extrinsic
Okay.
goals, and then we went right to four, which is overcoming setbacks.
Okay. All right. So, do you want to? We'll revert back to segment 3.
I think we can do it in a wrap up. I think we can use that section as a wrap up of like, here's some great way, like we address some goals, and here's some great way of tracking goals. Journaling, weekly reflection logs, behavioral, measurable tracking. I think just kind of sprinkling it in at the end.
Okay, cool. So let's when we do the segue, so I'll start off. I'll say like, here are some action items to take away from this.
Yes.
Okay, so all right, cool. So going over everything that we've discussed today, here are some action items that you can take away today to start with better goal tracking and measuring your progress. So you have the ability to reflect back on, whether you're making progress, if you're flatlining, if you're declining, and seeing what levers you need to pull to kind of get yourself back on track. So, Dr. Lore, tell me, what is one of your favorite ways to track your goals?
I love journaling. I'm a personal big journaler. I use the Notes app on my phone just because it's convenient. And if I write in a notepad, I will lose that notepad and then have to start over. So I use a notepad in my phone. And again, with that measurable goal, what I'm doing is I'm addressing that. Putting the log in of like if I'm working on playing on the draw, like how many games did I play on the draw? How did that feel? Did my feeling change? Did my comfortability change? Like what is my measurable thing I'm working on, right? And I'm tracking that. And then so then later, at the end of the week, I can look back at that and go, was I making the same errors over and over again? Or how did I progress through the week? When did that shift happen? What was that thing that happened? Because I'm writing out what happened, in my matches. I make a bullet point and make kind of a thing. Oh, I played on the draw and I did this, and then I did this. Like it doesn't have to be a lot of data. Like it can be like 2 or 3 sentences on each kind of match I had. But then once you aggregate all that data together and look over it, you can start seeing those patterns. And because sometimes it's hard to see those the forest amongst the trees per se. And so I love that. That's my personal favorite is journaling and using a journal to kind of really understand what I'm working towards and how I'm getting there. What about you?
So the project manager in my heart loves like a lot of the digital tools that are available. So I've been a big fan of a project management tool called ClickUp.
Okay.
I've used it throughout a lot of my professional career, and even surprisingly enough, in my Lorcana career as well too. For example, for the content creation part of it, I have a specific section that has a bunch of tasks that are relatable. You can link them to each other, set dependencies and stuff like that. So like that has helped me break down bigger, loftier goals. Like
Mm,
from saying like I want to be a Lorcana content creator, right? What does that entail, right? There's a lot of social media marketing, these podcasts themselves, those pieces, and then you can configure progress bars to kind of show, like, all right, here's my check-in, my monthly check-in. I've out of the goals I set for the month of November, I'm on track to hit 75%. So then from there, I can, reflect and be like, okay, I'm very happy that I hit 75%, but maybe I need to readjust for December, considering it is a part of the holiday season. So maybe I won't commit to as many written articles, or, we might skip a week in a podcast episode. So it really, like, that has helped me realize that like there's only so much that I can do, right? And it
yeah.
makes it easier for me to um say no to a lot
Mm,
of things, because naturally I like to just like, yeah, this is amazing, I want to do it. But sometimes when you have full visibility on your, what is on your plate, you have to say no, or you have to give up something that you've already committed to, which doesn't really feel good, especially when you have other people involved. So that's helped a lot. And I always recommend any type of goal tracking for anybody. And I've even seen it for people who do play at the highly competitive events. You might even see it on Twitter, for example, right? People will post their match results as the event is going on. And it's really neat because it kind of checks off two things, right?
hmm
If you're a content creator, you're constantly updating your audience on how well you're doing, but you also have those notes that you were taking to look back on to, did the deck that I build attack the majority of the anticipated meta share for the specific decks that I was targeting? And you can look back and be like, wow, I was hyper focused on being able to beat Blurple. And I ran into a lot more purple steel than I wanted to. So maybe I need to make some adjustments for the next time.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I love that idea because we don't have to be experts in areas. Like I can sit here and break down SMART goals and how that's an acronym for a goal setting strategy, but like using the technology that's already there, right? If we don't have a really clear, like we have a kind of amorphous goal, ChatGPT is a thing. Create me a SMART goal as a TG player working towards this thing, and it can create you, in even say create me a tracking log, and it will do that. I've done that with some of like even some physical fitness like things I was working towards, and it will create you a log and you can print it off, and like you don't have to be an expert, but use the technology that we have. You use an application, and I think that that is an amazing strategy. And like, use the technology is there. We all don't have to be experts in creating these things, but we can use the tools around us to allow us to achieve that expert level goal setting and achievement without kind of having to master all the other educational pieces behind it.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
Well, I do appreciate this conversation. I think, sometimes people feel like goal setting is this like simplistic thing of just like, I'm going to throw something out there and then like work towards it. But to really understand how our brain responds to really healthy goals, whether it be, the intrinsic, achievable goals, and how we can become flexible to approach those goals is key to being successful, not only in the grander scheme of our larger goal, but also that success of continuing being a great part of this community, growing, becoming more competitive, or even just like, being more engaged in the Lorcana community as a whole, not even just playing, but maybe even, like you said, in the content creation side.
Yeah, for sure. And I think most importantly, if there's one thing that you can take from today's episode, let it be this: align your goals with your values, track your progress, and give yourself permission to adjust. That's
Mm-hmm.
what real sustainable change looks like.
100%. I couldn't agree more. I think that is a great statement to end on. Please comment below your goals. I mean, whether it be your goals for the next DLC, whether it be your goals for the remainder of this set, or even maybe some larger goals in the Orkana or the TCG space. Comment below and let us know what those are for you.
Awesome. Well, with that being said, have a great day and we'll see you in the next one. Nice.